Yo, yo, yo. Welcome to the Around the 412 Fantasy Football Show for the last time in 2021. With me, as always, are my boys, Joe and Drew. What's going on, fellas?
What up,
brother?
man? Greetings from Pittsburgh.
Championship week.
That's true. You gotta. I saw you starting to show the hat and hoodie. Where's my Pittsburgh clothing company?
Yeah,
I don't know,
man.
it's
I
somewhere
thought that was
around
a Burger King hoodie that you got when you were in high school.
I mean, kind of true. I mean, I did live 5
Similar.
minutes away from the Southside Burgers, so plenty of experiences there.
Oh, Joe is in Pittsburgh right now. Drew, you're coming to Pittsburgh pretty soon as well. We're about
2
to have the
days,
whole crew
baby.
here. One last ride for Ben. I did have him as the background for a second, but we can't talk if we do that. So shout out to Ben. Shout out to Seven. One more time at Heinz Field, at least the regular season. Why does Joe have Pringles stacked up? Oh, yeah, we might as well get this out of the way right now.
Same thing.
Yeah. So I'm broadcasting from my brother's room because I'm home right now, and he's a big proponent of the limited edition MOA chips, which are from Halo. So if you haven't seen these, they're really delicious. I don't really know what they taste like, but they just are.
But you said that they're delicious.
They're amazing.
Have you had them before?
Oh yeah, I was eating them yesterday. They're really good.
Oh, so you just can't do a seltzer review because you don't know how to place it.
No, I don't. It's tough. Yeah. But yeah, so he has quite the collection of chips that he's eaten through the course of probably the last year. Some would call it a problem. Others would call it the problem. So it is what it is.
Raise your hand if you're playing in championship weekend for fantasy football.
Where's your hand? Hand check.
Hey, let's raise your hand if you've already won a championship.
My championship.
Oh, really?
Week, so.
Hey, yeah, I had that nail biter that I didn't expect to be a nail biter. I was up 27, and then it came down to the defense for Miami against New Orleans, and I was like, well, surely it'll be fine. And then when Kamara had that fumble return for the touchdown, they ended up calling back. Like I would have lost right there. And that was like the group chat of like the entire league was like, like just rapid fire mode. And I was like, nah, man, he was down. And like, I didn't want to talk any shit early because the day before I lost a playoff, I was down 36. And then the Dallas defense almost brought me back. And I was like, well, I'm not going to say anything because it's Ian Book and I don't trust anybody from Notre Dame except maybe Chase Claypool on like 2 Sundays a year. But it was a very not fun one to watch, but yeah.
Hey,
we saw it out.
You had Cole Kmet as a deep sleeper tight end. He's Notre Dame product.
Yeah. And how'd that work out?
Yeah, it didn't work out at all.
Super.
By the way, Pittsburgh Clothing Company saw the hoodie. They said Joe Frick is having a phenomenal hoodie day.
Great hoodie day. Yeah, I had a Pittsburgh Clothing Company Christmas with my in-laws, so all of my gifts were from them. Tough to beat. It's like I think the majority of my closet is them and DC4L custom tees at this point. So. Not a bad life to live.
No. I don't know if you guys, you know what? We don't even need to talk about fantasy football. We'll see you guys next year. Everybody take care.
Good luck this week.
All right. Well, I have nothing to really talk about from my perspective. How confident do you guys feel about your respective teams that are playing this week, though?
I feel pretty good in the one that I have. So it's a 14-team league. We do 5 keepers, and you get to keep them for 2 years. So I had the trade of a lifetime last year. It was David Johnson, Leonard Fournette, and they were both first-round picks. And then I got in return Kamara for a 10th. So I got Kamara last year, won the championship. Looking at it there. But I've got Nick Chubb against the Steelers, which, as we know, the Steelers have not been able to stop a nosebleed. Brandon Cooks has a good matchup against San Francisco. And the team that I'm playing, like, we have return yards as like a stat that you can get points for, but his team is really Mahomes, Devonta Adams, Penny, and then he literally has like Berrios from the Jets in his lineup. He has Josh Palmer, Jeff Wilson, Justin Jackson. So it's going to be tough for him to put a team together, especially with Waller going on the COVID list.
And this person's in the championship.
Yeah. Well, Berrios ran the kick last week for a touchdown. Yeah. So you get the 100 return yards plus the touchdown. He had like 4 catches or something like that. Yeah. This particular league does.
That's weird.
It's different, but I'm not going to complain. I've been winning.
He's probably going to take Palmer out because Mike Williams got activated today.
Yeah, exactly. So. And Jackson's not going to be playable because Eckler's back. So it's like a lot of people that were good for that week to get him to the chip, but he's got his work cut out for him, especially if Gibson ends up not going. I know he didn't practice today, was a limited participant yesterday. We were talking about it before the show. Seems like a bit of a turf toe thing, and that's been bugging him from what you said, like last December.
Yeah, he had a turf toe injury last year in December, and then he missed a couple games, I think weeks 15 and 16, and then came back, and then it just lingered all offseason. He came into camp this year still suffering with that turf toe injury. So it looks like something that could be a thing for him going forward if he keeps stubbing his toe and then getting tackled like that. But I mean, I don't know if he's going to play or not. It's still early. They could just be resting him because they want to have him, but he's just not ready to go yet.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, especially because are they still in contention, or is it kind of like whatever at this point?
I think they're out of it. I think the Eagles beating them last week or 2 weeks ago eliminated them.
Gotcha. Yeah, because Dallas is going to run away with that division. So,
and the Eagles can clinch this week a wild card, which is kind of crazy considering how bad they started.
Yeah, their defense has stepped it up a lot in the last couple of weeks. That's been a big key to the turnaround, and they finally started running the ball with Miles Sanders. I mean, it kind of seemed like a bust of a pick, like going into like the first half of the year between the injuries and them just not feeding the ball. It was like even the big games that they had on the ground, it was like Boston Scott had like more points than he did. But he broke his hand. He's out for the year. Jordan Howard returned to practice today, so we'll see if he's able to suit it up. I like the matchup that the Eagles have on the ground. So Jordan Howard would be a nice play. If he doesn't go, obviously Boston Scott, Kenneth Gay will become a little bit more viable.
Boston Scott is a amazing DFS option this week.
Yeah. I do think that Howard's going to get the majority of the work, though. He's been pretty good for them, which is interesting because a few years ago he was like 1,400 yards guaranteed when he was in Chicago, and then he kind of fell off a bit. But
Platt was telling me last night he needs more DFS information from Drew, so there we go.
I've been
DFS
on a hot streak, so I mean, I don't know if it's
hot streaks. Have you seen what Platt's been doing betting wise? The dude's been on a tear.
Yeah.
Not surprised.
And I tailed like 3 of his bets, and of course they were all the ones that didn't hit. So he's just crushing everything else except for the ones I touched.
All right, let's talk about some injuries. I assume that this first one is James Robinson. Drew.
Yep. Yeah, he tore his Achilles, so he's done for the year, and that's gonna
so sad, man.
Yeah, and it's gonna go into next year. I know a lot of guys are coming back faster. Obviously, Cam Akers is coming back after tearing his in like July or whatever, but he's not going to be able to condition all offseason. So even if he does come back early next year, you can't be confident he's going to be a big time fantasy asset.
Well, how about Travis Etienne coming back next year too?
Yeah. I mean, his is a Liz Frank though, so those Hollywood Brown took like 2 or 3 years before he really got over his Liz Frank. So who knows what's going to go on in that backfield going into next year? I think Etienne obviously is the guy you're going to want to throw a dart at, but they both might be hindered by injuries going through next year.
I think too, we need to monitor who the head coach is, because it's going to be somebody that wasn't on staff to draft either of those 2 guys, who ends up being the preferred option for that head coach.
Yeah, some might say they need someone that could kick them in the ass a little bit, but might be too soon.
All right. Another guy that's out for the rest of the season is Adam Thielen. Does this open up? How do you guys feel about like a guy like KJ Osborne for the last couple of weeks here, either as a play in season long for the championship or as a DFS play?
Definitely DFS.
Yeah, I like him a lot, actually. The way that Minnesota operates as far as like the receivers go, pretty much when Thielen and Jefferson were healthy, they're on the field for pretty much all snaps, and they really run like the 2 wide receivers that they have. So if they're going to have that happen, I mean, Jefferson, he can't be covered. Like, it's impossible. KJ Osborne had 50 snaps last week, 36 routes run, so easily second on the team, 7 targets, and that was with Thielen leaving the game. D.D. Westbrook is a non-threat. The only other receiver that saw the field was Dan Chisna, and I don't really care about Conklin all that much, although he does have like a sneaky matchup this week. But I think with Cook coming back, that's going to open things up in the air. Jefferson's going to get the bulk of the load, but there's a lot worse options that you have than Osborne for sure.
Yeah, and KJ Osborne's been scoring a lot of touchdowns. They look for him in the red zone. I think he scored 3 of the last 4 weeks. And I'm a little worried about Dalvin Cook coming back from COVID because you see a lot of these guys that are struggling the first game back when they come back from the COVID list. especially running backs. And he was not vaccinated, so we don't know what his symptoms are, but there's a good chance that he may have been symptomatic, could have hindered him a little bit. So he might not get a full workload. Alexander Mattison might dip into that a little bit.
Yeah, it'll be interesting too. I think if I'm going to play Osborne this week, the person that I'm going to watch out for is Jair Alexander, because if he's back in the lineup, that's going to change the dynamic for Green Bay's defense like quite a bit. They've been like a slightly negative matchup in the last 3 weeks if you're looking at like points against. But if they are not going to have Alexander, then you know that they're going to do everything to try to bracket Jefferson, and that's going to open up Osborne even more. If they do have Alexander, then I probably wouldn't play Osborne unless I necessarily have to, just because it's a divisional game. It's going to probably be pretty cold. And when you get into those cold weather games, I think it's in Lambeau this week.
Yeah.
So the points per game in lower temperatures is just so much worse. So to me, it's like they're probably going to run more of a ground game. So that gives a little bit of a boost to like your Cooks, Madisons, Jones. But yeah, it's like it really is just going to depend on the health of Alexander. But yeah, Osborne is at best a flex play for me this week. If you have like a week 18 thing, then that could be a little bit different. But
the thing though is Green Bay, especially Rodgers, he just shows up in prime time in December. I think this is going to be a sneaky high scoring game where the Vikings are going to have to throw it.
Yeah. I mean, I had Kirk Cousins as my number 10 quarterback this week, but I think the cold weather is going to – I would be taking the under. Not that I'm flat or anything, but the cold weather just – it diminishes. I'm sure that that's baked into the over-under, but I don't think there will be a lot of points to be had, which is good if you're playing against them.
Doesn't Rodgers go out in the snow and throw 5 touchdowns in December some years?
Yeah, maybe.
I'll have to ask Platt what he thinks about this.
It's more than before he was immunized, so –
in that foot injury.
True, that's true.
Cold weather, you think that's certainly not helping that foot. What was I going to say? DJ mentioned a great wide receiver here. Amon-Ra St. Brown has been hot. NFC Rookie of the Month. We actually had a conversation about him, not on the show, but just through our group chat. So, I mean, briefly, I guess it could be a topic on here just since DJ brought him up. I know where we stand on him just because of our conversation, but I guess for the sake of the listeners, what do we think about Amon-Ra St. Brown?
I love him this year. So a little bit of data for you guys. So Amon-Ra St. Brown has the most receptions for a rookie taken after the second round since 2008. So if you look at like some comps that he has, I know we talked about him a lot, is Hunter Renfrow. In terms of like slot percentage, like yards per route run, things like that. Another player that his comps line up pretty well with is Doug Baldwin. To me, I really like him to finish the rest of this season. But I think that there's a lot of like interesting outcomes that don't necessarily play or based off of his talent. I could very much see Detroit bringing in someone for next season if you're in like a keeper league or if you're in like a dynasty league. To me, he might be somebody that's a prime sell high candidate just because he's doing so well. And the reason I think that is because, one, I think they believe in TJ Hawkinson, and I think that he's going to be like the primary beneficiary of targets on the offense. I know that people don't really believe in Goff all that much. But if the tight end is a number one target, if they bring in one receiver, maybe it's we talked about Chris Godwin, maybe it's Michael Thomas, maybe it's one other player, or even if they draft another guy, if he becomes the number 2 receiver, that sounds good in theory. But if he's actually the third target receiver, when you throw in one, Swift can catch the ball, and then you have Hawkinson being like a primary target, then that really can limit his upside without any injuries. So to me, it's like he's in a really good situation because Detroit is so awful. They have a horrible team, and they're going to be throwing the ball a lot. But is it something that he can keep going beyond the season? I don't know. But for the remainder of the season, if Goff is playing, then I like St. Brown a lot.
Drew?
I mean, I brought this up to you guys mainly because I'm an Amon-Ra St. Brown owner in our Dynasty League, and the price that I'm hearing for him in trades and Dynasty seems so high that I feel like I need to dabble and see if that's available for me.
What is that price?
I've seen late first, early second grade for Amon-Ra St. Brown, and I love the guy. I was in on him from the beginning. Me and Smitty were texting during that draft earlier this year, and I told him, I was like, I'm taking him right here. Like, I love the guy. Like, it's the type of receptions that he gets that I value. My roster's full of Hunter Renfrow, Deontay, Amon-Ra St. Brown. It's all these guys that are getting short, high percentage catches in a PPR league, and they are good running after the catch. I value that a lot, so I don't know if I would want to trade him personally because of that. I'm not afraid of him losing targets to other guys because depending on what receiver becomes the number one, it could open up more space for him to do more. I mean, you mentioned Michael Thomas. I wouldn't like that. I think that would kill Amon-Ra St. Brown's value because he's a lot of obviously Mr. Slant guy. But I like the
Williams
guy
would be perfect though. Wouldn't affect him at all.
Yeah, exactly. If something like that happens, I just think it makes him better. If we looked at the stats earlier in the year, I believe that DeAndre Swift and Jamal Williams were getting a ton of receptions because they just didn't have anyone else to throw to. And now he's established himself as a guy that they feel that they can target. And
but I mean, is he a guy that they feel like he's established, or is the rest of the room Josh Reynolds, Khalif Raymond, Tom Kennedy, and Kaderil Hodge? Like,
it doesn't matter what his competition is, though. He's catching the ball and doing stuff with it. He's getting 11 targets and getting like 8 receptions a game.
No, for sure. But it's like he might be the only professional athlete that they have at wide receiver and tight ends, excluding Josh Reynolds.
I don't think it matters who's around.
Perfect time right now for him to make his name. As long as this coaching staff stays intact. Perfect time to make his name then. So he's already acclimated.
That's what I mean. Like he might not have had competition for those targets, but he's getting them and he's doing something with it. So they can't ignore that.
But like in the same boat, like so is Russell Gage. And we all know that Russell Gage isn't like the next.
Yeah, but say Calvin Ridley comes back. They've supported two wide receivers for many years. The Falcons have supported 2 wide receivers for many years. Julio and Calvin Ridley were both must starts for maybe the last 3 or 4 years. I don't know when. I can't remember when Ridley came in the league, but
Ridley really was hit or miss up until last year. But
I think Ridley was a first round pick in 18.
Last year
he was like 23rd overall.
Yeah,
like Gage is a good third guy. You're not going to start him consistently, but Amon-Ra St. Brown is getting a ton of targets and he's doing something with it. They're not going to just put him back on the bench.
Has his price significantly increased in like DFS?
Yeah, I mean, he's in like 6,000 range, I believe. I can check what he's at this week. But I've started him. I think like maybe 5 weeks ago, I told you guys that I'm starting to like him because he was getting the targets, but he wasn't producing. And out of nowhere, he just started catching everything. And he's probably the main reason why I came back in our Dynasty League. I was like 3 games out of a playoff spot, and I stuck my way in. Yeah. And I've started him in DFS every week since.
Yeah. And he does have a plus matchup against Seattle this week. I think in championship week, he's somebody that's a must play. The dynasty stuff, we can talk about that until all of next year.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of unknowns that based on how the roster falls out going into next season.
Well, Drew, let us know if you make a trade and then we'll have to talk about it.
I mean, you're in the league. His price per DFS though this week, real quick. 6,000. So he's up there with Brandon Cooks, Terry McLaurin, Antonio Brown, Mike Williams. He costs more than Michael Pittman Jr.
Well, Michael Pittman Jr. had a great matchup last week and sucked. So
yeah.
And Carson Wentz has COVID this week. So
yeah, but they make their pricing. They make their pricing the week before, so his pricing should have went down because he got ejected for last week.
Gotcha.
And it should have went back up this week.
Also, back to the cold weather games. Just so if you compare to the league average since 1994, which is 42.1 points per game, game time temperatures. That's interesting. That's not the stat that I was looking for before. It says they were held in extreme cold have actually been high scoring. That's interesting. So it says below 20 degrees is 42.8 scored, below 10 degrees average of 43.3. So I guess I'm just going to eat my whole foot right now.
I don't think you're wrong. I don't worry about the weather when Aaron Rodgers is involved. I could see them easily putting up 3 or 4 touchdowns, and then Kirk is going to have to throw it. And also, I'm facing Rodgers in my fantasy championship, so you know he's going to go off.
Oh, yeah. All right. Let me adjust my rankings. Okay, we already touched actually on a couple of these other injuries just because of them coming up with Gibson and Sanders. But what about Clyde Edwards-Helaire? Got injured
He has
that
a
game against the
collarbone
Steelers.
injury, right? So I
Yeah.
don't think that they've given us much more information, but I don't think that he's practicing. They're obviously thinking long term, so I would imagine that he probably doesn't play. And my opponent also picked up Darrell Williams at waivers and started him. So
Yeah.
the inside
okay.
scoop.
I don't know. Do you know when he got hurt? Because Williams outsnapped him like 3-2 pretty much.
It was I think it was in like the second quarter, but I'm not positive.
Okay.
It was kind of early.
Yeah.
The game was out of reach, so it's probably in the first quarter.
Well,
We have no idea, basically.
Well, how do we feel about Darrell Williams this week then?
I mean, we all know how I feel about Darrell Williams, but I think he has a good opportunity. As far as matchups go, Cincinnati's been pretty stout against the run, so I don't really feel great about him there. I think that the Chiefs are going to attack through the air, and particularly with Travis Kelce, because they give up 26.7 points per game against tight ends, which is by far the worst of any team, and they've been terrible all season against the tight end. So I think that Travis Kelce has a huge game. If you put in the early claim for him in the drafts this year, then you're going to be loving life. And I think that even though Tyreek Hill's still on the mend from like having COVID, I think he's going to have a solid game too. But Darrell Williams, he does get some good work in the passing game. He had 3 targets last week. But Derek Gore also got a lot of tread. I think that was more game script related. But he had 3 targets as well. But I would imagine in a closer game, Williams will probably be the guy, and then Gore will spell him. I don't see if Edwards-Helaire is hurt what benefit they have other than if they're trying to go for that number 1 seed, because the Chiefs are locked into the playoffs at this point, right? Did they clinch the division when they beat the Steelers? Yeah, that's right, because they had the T-shirts and stuff ready the week before they lost. So.
This is a big game though, because the Bengals are how many losses do the Bengals have?
The Bengals, if they lose out and we win out, that we would win the division.
But do they have a chance of catching the number 1 seed? They have 5 losses.
No, they have 2. Well, they're 9-6. Chiefs are 11-4. But
the Bengals would need to win out. If the Bengals win out,
have to lose out.
Yeah.
What's the over under on this game? Because I personally think it's going to be a pretty high scoring game. Do you know?
I'm looking right now. 49.5.
I got it at 51, which showing me. But
yeah, that was from 2 days ago, so it might have moved since then.
High scoring game. I think that Darrell Williams will get a lot of opportunity. It's probably a solid RB2 this week.
Okay. Sticking with the RBs, Darryl Henderson. I'm assuming that's who this is.
He had 1 carry for like 27 yards, and he just got tackled awkwardly and with a knee injury. And honestly, you don't want to celebrate.
Hey, should we talk about Cam Akers?
You have to. He practiced in full today. How insane is that?
Yeah, the dude's a monster. And that hype video that they put out for him was sick. Like,
with Eric Dickerson, yeah, that was crazy.
But honestly, like, you don't want to celebrate anyone's injury, but like, was anyone wrong about Darrell Henderson at all this year? Everyone thought that he was gonna be very good early and then break down, and that's exactly, unfortunately, what happened. I was able to trade Darrell Henderson like right before. Crazy luck. I was able to acquire Justin Jefferson for him, and I get it. The dude was desperate because he lost Kamara, he lost I can't remember. He basically needed to win out, and all of his running backs all got hurt at once. So I gave him 2 starting running backs and acquired Jefferson because I had a ton of them. So I lucked out.
What's the guy's name?
Taylor. He was actually the one that's in our dynasty that almost went to the championship. He lost by 1 point.
Dang.
So his name's Taylor?
Yeah. It's
Taylor.
Honestly like the dude was desperate. Like, honestly, like.
Well, yeah, but not all of us are doctors either. So
yeah, he just did not have a single running back that he could start, and he needed to win out. So
that's tough. Who was the other running back?
It was right at the beginning of Kamara's injury. I think I gave him Mark Ingram, who he ended up playing for like 3 or 4 weeks. And I gave him Darryl Henderson. And I gave him a receiver too.
This is a travesty.
You're a douche.
This is a travesty.
Why am I a douche? He offered the trade. What am I supposed to say? No.
You're living up to the name, Drewsbag.
Yeah, Drewsbag is in full effect. Dr. Drewsbag. Yeah, I mean, I would have accepted the trade, but
that's tough.
I actually gave him.
What are you doing?
I was trying to find the trade. It doesn't matter. Screw it. Let's move on.
All right.
On behalf of the show, sorry, Taylor.
Why do I hear myself now?
Yeah, I hear an echo as well.
What'd you do, Drew?
They kept muting me, so I decided to act like I'm fake talking sometimes just to piss them off.
All right. Well, did you do something where we're echoing now? Actually, now I don't hear it.
Everything's fine for me. I don't have control like you guys do. I'm the one that just sits here and shows
know
up.
that you. I thought you changed something with your settings on accident, real quick or something. All right, moving on. Last injury to talk about, Mike Evans. Well, injury. He's also on the COVID list. But go ahead.
Yeah, so he suffered that hamstring injury 2 weeks ago. He didn't play last week. I don't really know the severity of his hamstring injury because they're not saying too much about it, but he is on the COVID list. The new 5-day window obviously is going to help him, and it's a little weird. Essentially, you have 5 days of quarantine now, and as long as you don't have a fever, they're letting you come back. So,
yeah,
they don't care anymore.
Part about it was as we kind of talked about in the show last week, Antonio Brown was going to get a lot of work as a result of both Godwin and Evans being out. He had 14 targets on 27 routes run, which is like absolutely hilarious. 10 receptions, 101 receiving yards. What was interesting to me, though, is that Gronk actually had the most snaps out of all wide receivers and tight ends that played. He only ran 28 routes and only had 2 targets, which was surprising to me.
Yeah, it's awful DFS play.
Yeah, so Ronald Jones actually ended up having more targets than Gronk did. Cameron Brate had more targets than Gronk did.
He caught a touchdown, too.
Right, and Kirill Grayson had more targets.
He played really well, actually, yeah.
Yeah, so it was weird. I don't know if that continues. But
they play the Jets this week. I wonder if it's worth just giving Mike Evans an extra week because they should just mow right through them with no issues, honestly. But
yeah, and the Jets, their weakness is against the run anyway, and just having to play offense because they're the turnover machines. So they should be plenty fine with what they have. Although you said that Antonio Brown popped up on the injury report with the ankle, so if they're without him, that's going to be pretty tough.
He was a DMP today, yeah.
A DNP on a Thursday. Interesting.
Yeah, but he's also one of those guys. He doesn't practice.
But the thing is, he practiced yesterday. That's the thing. So if he suffered a setback, I'm not sure.
Because this matters.
Let me see.
I have him up here.
Let's see. Was that today? Yeah, so today Brady didn't practice. He was resting. Antonio Brown did not practice. I don't see anything for Wednesday yet.
Article from Tampa concerning that he did not practice after being. Trying to find it. I'm going off the title. I'm trying to find. Oh, here it is. He was limited yesterday.
Okay. All right. Something to monitor. I guess, this could have been it with the injuries as well. Jimmy G, with what's going on with him. How do we feel about that impact on Deebo Samuel, George Kittle as we are in championship week?
I'll let you start on that.
Kittle got bottled up last week, which I wasn't really surprised about. Who did they play again?
Tennessee?
That's right, Tennessee. Tennessee's been good against tight ends all season. Deebo didn't really have that big of a game either. The Tennessee defense has been pretty hot. I think everybody like has kind of been pretty healthy and kind of rounding into form there a bit. But in my mind, those two guys have been studs all year. They're not people that I'm going to be worried about. And I don't think that Jimmy Garoppolo is that great of a quarterback. I think that this could potentially hurt the running backs more than the receiver and the tight end this week. I trust Kyle Shanahan's going to put him in positions where he's able to make easy reads, easy throws, which is going to result in more opportunities for like a PPR scenario for Debo and Kittle to have a lot of work. What we've seen from him in the offense with Lance is that he tends to run the ball a lot in the goal line scenarios, which could hurt Mitchell quite a bit because he looks like he's practicing ready to play this week. They have a good matchup for running backs for their game this week. So I had Mitchell in my top 10, but if they're going to utilize Lance in the red zone like that, that could really eat into that production there. But those guys have been tearing it up all year. There's no one, particularly in the tight end room, that I'm like, oh, George Kittle, like pull him out of the lineup.
You can't sit either Kittle or Samuel, but my biggest concern is that in recent weeks, majority of Debo Samuel's production has been coming as a running back. Like 2 weeks ago, he had that touchdown for 32 yards, but it was a rushing touchdown. He didn't have a single target. So if Trey Lance is going to be the one starting, I'm concerned that he's going to take a lot of those rushing attempts away in the red zone, because when he started, I'm pretty sure he had like 16 total runs in the one game. 11 of them were designed. So if he's not handing it off to Debo, that's a huge problem for me. And in terms of Eli Mitchell, I think I'm pretty sure I'm going to fade the entire Niners backfield because he's been out for like 3 or 4 weeks. I can see Jeff Wilson and him splitting those carries because Wilson's been good ever since he's been out. You have to start Samuel. How are you going to sit a guy that's a top 10 wide receiver on the year? But I'm concerned because the amount of touches that he's been getting have been majority out of the backfield. And when Trey Lance played, I'm pretty sure Samuel only had like 2 or 3 catches, except that one of them was like a 70-yard touchdown that happened on like the corners lost Samuel. He was just standing there all alone. If he doesn't have that one play, he's probably looking at like a 5 or 6 point output for that week. I'm just concerned. Jimmy's injury is pretty significant. It kind of correlates similar to what Drew Brees suffered 2 years ago, or last year. It's going to be difficult for him to throw the football. And it's one of those situations where he should probably shut it down for the season and he'd have surgery. But because he doesn't want to lose his job just yet to Lance, he's going to gut it out, in my opinion. He's going to struggle to throw the football.
Yeah, I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see. I think they don't have a great matchup against. It's interesting with Houston. So they're bad against the run. They're bad against tight ends, but they're good against, they're like a middling matchup for quarterbacks and receivers. Yeah. But I'm going to bank that more on playing Jacksonville than anything else because Herbert was fine last week.
But Herbert was good because he had to throw because they were down, which was
yeah.
It was
Rex
weird.
Burkhead season, baby. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, it ultimately depends on what you have. I mean, if you have other options, then maybe Debo is somebody you fade a little bit. But I'm not going to throw some random player that I'm like, oh, he has a good matchup. It's going to have to be all right, I have a stud or close to a stud. And then it's all right, it's just kind of pick your poison kind of thing.
This is more of a roster construction question, in my opinion.
In the two games
in
the 2 games that Trey Lance played, really, the one Kittle didn't play. He was out. Debo Samuel had 3 receptions for 58 yards in one of those. In the other one, he put up monster numbers, but I don't know how much because Garoppolo played as well. Samuel had 8 receptions for 156 yards and 2 touchdowns. Kittle had 4 for 40.
When Lance was on the field, he had maybe 1 or 2 catches, but one was like a 70-yard touchdown.
Okay.
I remember that play. He was off to the right side and just no one was
against
over
Seattle.
He caught it. Yeah, he caught that one on the sideline and just there was no one there. He just ran down. No one's even close to him. So if you take that one play away and say that first touchdown came from Garoppolo.
It could have. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, let me ask y'all this. So you think about somebody like Taysom Hill in New Orleans, where when they have him playing quarterback, the whole offense changes. Do you think that they're going to do something similar with Lance?
Yes. That's been my concern because
if you feel
you
that
have
way,
to you have to do what's best for Trey Lance to succeed, because if he doesn't succeed, odds are you're not winning that football game, and they're in the hunt. But the thing is, I'm still not sitting Samuel, because you can't sit a guy of that caliber. But you might have to look at your roster and be like, this guy Debo might have a down week compared to what you're used to. You might need to have another player that you can either get a safe floor on that you think is pretty decent, or a guy that has a better chance to boom, because you're going to need that cushion.
Yeah. Like, for example, like in my mind, like Devonta Smith has a great matchup this week, right?
He's playing against me too, so he's going to go off.
I'm not going to play Smith over Samuel.
Yeah.
Even though he has the better matchup, just because he's very inconsistent.
Right.
But if it's like, if I'm choosing between like T. Higgins and Samuel, I'll play Higgins.
Yeah.
So it really just depends on what my options are. I think Debo is a bigger fade to me than Kittle, because realistically, like, it's a crapshoot with the tight ends anyway.
Yeah, and a bad week from Kittle can still be better than the tight end you're facing, unless you're facing Kelsey or Andrews.
We had a couple questions in here, asked actually a while ago, but we didn't get to them yet. DJ said Mike Williams coming off the COVID list, worthy of starting.
Who are your other options? Because he's been so up and down after that hot start anyways.
I'm going to say no. I think Denver played like crap last week. I mean, I know that I had both Williams and Gordon like planned for big games, and they did absolutely nothing. They got embarrassed. And Drew Lock surprisingly didn't even have that bad of a game. But I don't think that Mike Williams is startable for me championship week. He could have himself a game. I don't see it. I wouldn't feel comfortable with him in my lineup.
It depends who else he has, though. If he has
Sarge also has Mike Williams as an option, but he's saying, would you guys start or sit Terry McLaurin this week? I have him, Mike Williams, OBJ, AJ Brown, and Amon-Ra St. Brown.
This is for the ship. Man, so Terry McLaurin has been so hit or miss this whole season. He was kind of a guy that I will give him benefit of the doubt. I mean, I think if he had Fitzmagic for the season, I think he would have been a wide receiver 1 this year. But Taylor Heineke is incredibly inconsistent. I don't like the matchup that they have this week. So they are playing, let me see. So Washington has Philly. Philly's been locked down. So to me, like, that's a no-go.
Darius Slay has shadowed Terry McLaurin the last 3 years, and Terry McLaurin's been very mediocre against him as well. So
shout out to the Cream Life for starters. For 2, St. Brown is a must start for me this week. I think that goes without saying. I think with the way AJ Brown, I mean, you look what he did against the Patriots last week, and they've been a lockout like team for everybody. And the target share that he had 60% of the targets for the team. So to me, you have to throw him in there. If you have to choose a third out of that group, I would take St. Brown. There was another question that came up, Pittman or St. Brown. I think if Goff is playing, then you got to do that. So Sarge said 2 starters for sure, St. Brown and AJ Brown. Trying to figure out the third.
Do you think Van Jefferson's the other receiver you want this week?
Let me look at.
I feel like the Ravens are just so decimated in their secondary that they're just going to be able to go over the top.
Yeah, I'm actually playing for them. They have nobody.
So if you look at snap counts, they're pretty consistent. So Van Jefferson had 69, Cooper Kupp had 68, Odell Beckham had 63. Pretty much routes run was even across the board. Odell Beckham had 2 more targets than Van Jefferson. I would probably play Odell over Mike Williams personally. I know that Stafford kind of screwed everybody with the million interceptions that he had last week. I think we had him ranked pretty high. I know he was my quarterback 1. He just flopped. But I'm expecting a bounce back game for them. Baltimore, I don't know. Did they get anybody back this week from injury? I know like they
got worse, didn't it?
Baltimore?
Yeah, it got worse, I think. They lost another corner mid in the game last week.
Yeah. But they got a bunch of guys back from the COVID list and stuff. There's only like 1 guy still on the COVID list.
Yeah. But like their whole secondary.
Yeah, Anthony Averett got hurt.
Yeah, they're just completely wrecked.
So my third would be, if just keeping in the theme of the Browns, I would take Odell Beckham. So former Brown, AJ Brown, Saint Brown.
DFS, would you take Van Jefferson or OBJ? Because I'm
DFS, I mean, they only separated by 2 targets. Van Jefferson drops like 30 passes in the end zone. I would probably take Van Jefferson as a DFS play, but I mean, not in a fantasy championship.
Yeah, that's fair.
Pick 2, half PPR, Devonta Smith, Michael Pittman, Christian Kirk, and Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Does Trevon Diggs shadow? If he shadows, Christian Kirk cannot be started.
I mean, is Christian Kirk really on your radar for this anyway?
Yeah, but who's the top receiver there right now? Are you just saying you're removing him? We're not a big fan of Devonta Smith this week, right? Even though he has the good matchup because they've been so.
No, I
feel
like
it's
him
a big
week.
Boston Scott week, in my opinion.
I'm just saying that, like, I'm not going to play him just because he has a good matchup over the studs. I mean, he had a good game last week, and his ADOT was like 15 or 16 yards, which is pretty insane. The thing with the Cardinals, though, is that Kirk has been getting crazy numbers. He had 9 targets in week 16. Zach Ertz had 14 catches, I think. So Kirk has like a pretty high floor. He's like their top, like they pretty much throw to Ertz and they throw to Kirk. So it's like, I don't know. It's just really what you think about that game. The Dallas defense is good, but they're also susceptible to bigger plays too. But it's like, you look at, they lock up Terry McLaren pretty good. So it's like, why wouldn't they be able to do it to Kirk?
Are you worried about Pittman where Jonathan Taylor's just going to run the ball down the Raiders' throats all day, especially because Ellinger has a good chance of starting?
I don't like Pittman at all this week. I would say out of those, I would probably play St. Brown and I would take Smith. I think Kirk's good, but the matchup's pretty tough. I don't really like what Arizona's doing on offense right now. And Smith has been balling out decently. Actually, let me revise that. So if I'm projected to win, I'm going to take Christian Kirk because he has the safer floor with the targets, especially in like a like even with the half PPR. If it's going to be close or I'm projected to lose, Devonta Smith has the best outcome for like a big game. So that's probably how I'd run it.
Yeah, that's
interesting.
I agree.
Yeah, I don't know. Me on the surface, I thought Devonta Smith and St. Brown, but I definitely see what you're saying. With the floor with Christian Kirk, with no Hopkins. Rondo Moore's still out, isn't he, too?
I think so.
He's on the COVID list. I think.
He's not off the list yet. But, I mean, even with him in there, Kirk becomes like their main guy.
Right. I'm just thinking the less mouths to feed as well. But, okay. I think there was something else topic-wise. Wasn't there? Yes, Devin Singletary taking over the Bills' backfield, potentially. Do we think that has happened?
I don't know. I mean, they do this.
Does it matter? That might be a better question. Does it matter if he's the number one running back?
I will not be playing Singletary anywhere.
What's their matchup this week?
They are playing it's Buffalo versus Atlanta. Atlanta gets torched through the air.
I think that he is a flex option if you need to. He's had maybe 16 carries last week, 22 carries the week before that, scored in 2 straight weeks. They're running the ball more because Josh Allen's hurt.
Yeah, but the thing is that he had 6 targets last week. That's cool, I guess. But he only got 12 carries.
Oh, he only had 12 last week. So it was 22, 16, then 12. So it went down.
Yeah. It's just like, I don't know. I don't see it, and I don't trust them. Like, they
also played New England last week, though, who is...
Yeah, New England didn't have a good game at all last week. So I'm just throwing that out the window. But I just don't trust the backfield. And the problem I have with it is that Josh Allen is their goal line back.
He hasn't been, though, recently, is my point. Just because of his injury.
Yeah, I don't know. I still can't trust it. I mean, obviously, if it comes down to it, I think that Singletary is definitely outworking in terms of the snaps. I mean, he had 54 snaps to Zach Moss's 26. He's getting a lot more work, like as far as routes run. He had 6 targets last week. He had the 12 carries to Zach Moss's 3. I would just rather play someone like a Sony Michel I would rather play
Speaking of Sony Michel,
Jordan Howard, someone like that. I don't trust Baltimore. I don't trust Buffalo running the football because they don't do it a lot. They're a pass first team, so I'm hesitant to throw that in there, even with like the positive matchup that they have.
Sony Michel or James Conner?
You gotta see if James is playing before we can even miss last week.
I'm gonna take Sony Michel. I mean, with Henderson banged up, even if Akers plays, he's only gonna get a couple carries, and Sony Michel has been balling out pretty well. I mean,
except when I needed Akers DFS.
Yeah, but it's interesting. I mean, look at the way that Arizona constructed themselves. I mean, James Conner's been productive because he's the goal line back, and they've been getting to the goal line a lot. But you see that, like, when he was really dominant in the middle of the season, it was just a benefactor of Chase Edmonds being out. Then the script flipped, and then Chase Edmonds had himself a big game last week. I personally don't think that Conner plays. I know we talked about this last week on the show that Arizona's been very hesitant to bring people back from injury.
They caught up to him, though.
Yeah,
that's the thing. It caught up to him.
But he still hasn't been practicing. I honestly don't think that James Conner is going to play. I think the injury is worse than they're leading on. So, I mean, that makes the decision easy. But
Sony's going to get a ton of volume. You're right.
Yeah.
Because they're not going to give Cam Akers more than maybe 10 snaps unless he absolutely has to be on there. I feel like Jake Funk's going to get more work than he will. And you don't get scared of him taking carries away.
Yeah.
Full PPR flex: Pittman, Elijah Mitchell, or Chase Edmonds. Well, if
Conner
Conner
doesn't
doesn't play, I mean,
it's definitely Edmonds if Conner doesn't play.
Yeah, and then I would take Mitchell over Pittman. Mitchell has a nice game this matchup this week. Pittman has a pretty rough one. And Mitchell, when he's been healthy, he's been the guy for San Francisco. They don't really run the carousel like he's going to get the carries, and he's been really good this year. So I like that one a lot.
I still don't trust that though.
Niners defense.
I don't trust Kyle Shanahan at all.
Niners defense or Colts defense. Houston has a decent offense, but Colts also might have Wentz out, so I'm torn.
I'm rolling with the Niners there. I think they have one of the best matchups of the week. I don't care that Rex Burkhead had a good game last week. It doesn't matter to me. Colts are playing who are the Colts playing this week again?
Raiders.
Yeah, they got the Raiders. I'm not trusting that. I mean, they've been doing well even against stronger opponents, but the Niners have such a good matchup this week that I'm rolling them everywhere that I can. They're like a top 3 play for me this week.
Same. Drew, do you have any objection before I mute you?
Niners have the Texans, right?
Yeah.
I kind of would prefer a different option, in my opinion. I feel like the Raiders will put up some points, and the
What, are you afraid of Davis Mills lighting it up?
Dude, like, he's been sneaky okay the last few weeks. Like,
the only team that I would rather have this week would be the Patriots against the Jaguars after they got embarrassed last week. Like, if the Jaguars get 100 yards, like, I'll be happy for them.
Mm-hmm.
I like whoever's playing the Giants.
That's the Bears, who are decimated by injuries.
I still like them better than Jake Fromm.
That's a good point.
And Mike Glennon.
Yeah.
Is it going to be Mike Glennon?
They said that they're both going to play.
Yeah, it's one of those weird scenarios like Carolina last week where they were just going back and forth with quarterbacks. It's just dumb. Like, I was able to get the Bears off waivers.
Eddie said, if my waiver claim for Darrell Williams clears, would you play him other running back to Singletary?
I think it depends on the status of CEH. If CEH doesn't play, I feel a lot more comfortable with Kansas City using him than I do with the Singletary, because at least we know kind of how they've utilized him, where Singletary it's been kind of riding the wave. So if CEH plays, I'd probably play Singletary. If he doesn't, then I'd ride Williams.
I think it's funny that
you'd what?
The whole Singletary thing came up for someone's actual roster. So I had it on there.
True. We didn't know that was going to happen. As we do every week, Joe, you can kind of go over your chart, talk about the trends that we've seen, and I don't know how to use it, I guess, if they're first timers.
Yeah, for sure. So what we're looking at right now is a points allowed per game in the past 3 weeks. If there was a team that has been on bye in those 3 weeks, then I'll go back a fourth week and pull the data for them. So we're looking at a 3-game sample. But the idea behind this chart is that so much changes on a week-to-week basis, and a lot of the rankings that you see that are utilized are based off of like seasonal statistics, which is great. But whether injuries, COVID, something happens schematically, then you want to make sure that you're up to date with what's going on. So if we're looking at this chart, team on the left are the defenses that we're going up against this week. Teams that are in blue, that means that they've been struggling against that particular area. So if we're looking at quarterback matchups, Washington, they kind of had like a hot streak there in the last couple of weeks, but they've fallen off again. Dak's been torching them, and Hurts had a middling game 2 weeks ago. But you can see that they're very much in the dark blue. So if you have Jalen Hurts, you pick them up for that playoff push, then you're feeling pretty good about like your chances this week. And then on the flip side, Miami's been very locked down lately. And that's been the key to their 7-8 game win streak. I mean, imagine like firing Brian Flores after they were 1-7. To think that they're going to be like at the 7th seed right now is just absolutely phenomenal. But that's here nor there. But you can see that very much in the red, only allowing 10.8 points per game. So if you have Tannehill, probably going to be looking at other options on the waiver wire. Now, this isn't an absolute
revenge game, though.
That's also fair. So this isn't an absolute. That doesn't mean that like, let's say, for example, somebody that has a tough matchup. Let's see here. So Kyler Murray
for a sec. That actually, you're going right where I was going to ask you. So for people that have Arizona players, like I'm still trying to choose between Joe Burrow and Kyler Murray. I don't know if it's fair to base Dallas's defense. Like obviously they've been good. Micah Parsons been a monster, but when you look at the last 3 matchups, I feel like those numbers are incredibly skewed because Washington and the Giants have been a complete disaster.
Oh yeah, like absolutely. And you do have to take into consideration like what the matchups are. If all this data set gets sourced from fantasyfootballtoday.com, and they actually have outputs that do like the last 3 weeks, the last 5 weeks, in the whole season. So you can kind of see like, all right, is this like a blip? Is there like a longer trend? So for me, like in a championship week, like I'm wanting to play teams that are currently blue and that have been blue like for most of or all of the season. Like that's your best case scenario, right? Then like after that, like teams that have been trending downwards for some time. So like beginning of the season, for example, Steelers, they were middling against the run and they've progressively gotten worse. So like a situation like that, like that's beneficial if you have Nick Chubb feeling pretty good. But somebody like Washington started really like in the blue. They faded into the red, and now they're back up into the blue. So it's like you don't really know what you're going to get from them. It could be like a hit or miss kind of thing. But the way that you should look at this is it's like, all right, when you're thinking about roster construction, if I have studs that are in negative matchups, this doesn't necessarily mean that you shouldn't play anybody. I'm not saying that you should start, say, let's see here, like Drew Lock this week because he has a plus matchup against the Chargers. Right? You're not going to play Drew Lock over Kyler Murray in the championship game. It's just not going to happen. But if you have players of a similar tier, or if you're in a bind where it's like, all right, I know that I have good players that have bad matchups, where can I possibly pick up some points elsewhere so that like I'm in a better spot? So we were talking about like the Christian Kirk versus like the Devonta Smith. Like that's a prime example. Like neither one of those are really stud matchups that you're like, all right, they're matchup proof. I'm not worried about them. But if you're saying, all right, like I might be in a little bit of a hole, maybe Smith is that better play because he has the potential with the better matchup that he's facing. So that's kind of how I utilize this. I know that you utilize this, Drew, for like a lot of your DFS stuff and have had some success with it. So that's cool. Yeah, this is really just data. So it's not saying, all right, start blue, ignore the red. Last week, it would have said bench Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs because they had the toughest matchups for quarterback and receiver, and they crushed. But it's definitely a good tool that you can use when you're constructing your lineups.
And this isn't just PPR. There's also half point, standard, and isn't there something that tells people how to read it? Is that not on?
Yeah, it's in the next. It's on the next tweet. Just because no one really was looking at it, so it's in the thread. So you have the.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
All right.
Devonta Smith and Jalen Hurts looks like a very good DFS stack for this week, for sure.
What do you think about that, Joe?
What do I think about what?
Hurts and Smith stack.
Yeah, I mean, I like it. I think that's a solid play. I don't think either one of them will be too expensive. Shooting from the hip of other players that I might go with that. I think Nick Chubb, obviously with the injury to Hunt. The only tough part about that is them expecting a low-scoring game in classic Pittsburgh, Cleveland fashion, so you're not really getting the points from it per se. But yeah, there's a lot of different paths you can go. I think Cooper Kupp is going to have a monster game this week, so if you rode him to the championship, you're probably going to feel pretty good. And then we mentioned Kelsey has the best matchup on paper for tight end. So I think if you can, this week in DFS, if you can play save money in ways so you can pick up one of those guys, then do it like that.
Right before
Why do I have a
Eddie
feeling
asked,
this isn't going to be a serious question?
right before
I
he
know
asked,
it's not.
Lamar Jackson and Jimmy Garoppolo both did not practice again today.
Huntley's
chance
back.
Lamar
though.
looks bad moving around in that video.
Yeah, and also they were playing on sand. I don't.
That was the field. Derek said that was the field from the longest yard.
It's the back of a prison.
Oh, it is a real question.
What's the pick that he loses for CMC?
4-player keeper dynasty league, CMC and Diggs for short. What's the other part of this? Who else are we
What
talking
picks
about?
does he lose? CMC's not a sure thing for me. If he loses a first round pick,
Yeah, I mean, it's really going to be dependent on the picks for me. I don't care about James Conner in like a dynasty league because you don't know where he's going to land next season. Quarterbacks are a dime a dozen. So to me, like Pitts is a logical choice. I think getting Ridley back next year and whatever they decide to do with the draft, he's going to continue to.
Kyle Pitts got overdrafted this year.
Doesn't
though.
lose a pick.
Yeah. But I mean, potential moving forward. If I have to choose out of all those guys, I'm probably going to go CMC, Diggs, Pitts, and Burrow.
Same. I mean, you would think that with his success in Arizona, James Conner re-ups there, but
They're a committee though when they're both healthy.
For this week?
Jamar. Oh, for this week, I'm sitting Deontay for Jalen Waddle, so I can already say that I would probably play Chase.
I'd probably
I don't know,
play
dude.
Deontay this
Ben's
week.
last home game.
I would
Yeah,
play
but
Deontay this week.
You think he gets shadowed by Denzel Ward?
Oh, for the keeper? Oh, I would keep both of those guys.
Yeah, what are we even talking about with
I would not keep the
quarterbacks then?
Yeah.
Get Joe Burrow out of here. Have him go grab that gold jacket, Hall of Fame bound, and get him out of here. He's not a keeper. So we got CMC, Diggs, Pitts.
No, I would say.
Wait,
CMC,
no.
I would say CMC, Diggs, Deontay.
No, it's 4. Yeah, 4 for 4. Yeah, right.
You're going to keep Deontay when Mason Rudolph or someone else might be the quarterback next year?
Yes.
You don't think him and Aaron Rodgers will have a good connection?
Oh, in that case.
Jimmy G always picks his favorite receiver.
Adam says he's following Rodgers wherever he goes, so.
All right.
Is Deontay going to lose?
We're losing Juju and Washington, so we got room.
Oh, yeah. All of James Washington's targets. Perfect amount for Devonta Adams.
Eddie, we got CMC, Diggs, Deontay, Chase. Right?
Yeah.
Kyle Pitts.
You can but the thing is that it's gonna he goes back into the pool, people are gonna be like, he didn't do so great last year. I guarantee you that any of those other 4
He's starting to come on though.
That's great and all, but I mean, Diggs, Deontay, they are upper echelon for fantasy for this year. Chase had the hot start. They'll all get drafted over where Pitts would be next year.
He's a quarterback in Atlanta next year.
I don't know. But we're holding up for family Christmas. I gotta get
Aaron Rodgers. Yeah. All right. Well, that wraps it up. We will see you guys next year.
Good one.
No, but seriously, thanks for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe to the channel. Leave us a like. Leave us a comment. Get at us on Twitter. Get at us on Sundays. Ask us any fantasy questions you might have. For Joe, for Drew, this is Smitty. This is the Around the 4-2 Fantasy Football Show, and we will catch you guys next week. Bye-bye.
Get an Uber. Don't drive drunk.